Welcome, dear listener. As we begin this slow drift into the forgotten corners of the past, I invite you to take a breath, deep and unhurried, and let the world soften around you. Tonight, we're stepping quietly into the strange and often unsettling work that kept the medieval world turning, one grim task at a time. If you'd like, feel free to whisper into the comments where you're listening from and what hour the night finds you in. I always find it comforting, in a quiet sort of way, to see how far this still little circle of wanderers reaches. And if these hushed, heavy walks through history help you rest, you're welcome to linger, to subscribe, and to return whenever the night feels too loud. It is late, and the candles have burned low, their wax pooling quietly beside iron holders as the wind stirs against the shutters. Somewhere, a distant bell marks the end of a workday, though in truth, there is little rest for those who labor beneath the weight of medieval fear. Tonight, we are stepping into a world rarely shown in paintings or remembered in romantic tales, where the most terrifying jobs in history were not the ones done by soldiers or kings, but by the anonymous, the unfortunate, the ones who drew the shortest straw in a world already stacked against them. Picture a man standing ankle-deep in filth, his face wrapped in rags, his hands raw and cracked from cold and chemicals. He is a tanner, a processor of animal hides, and every part of his day is soaked in horror. The stench of rotting flesh clings to his clothes and hair. It lives in his skin now, too deep to wash away. His neighbors cross the street when they see him. Children whisper, he is not feared for power, but for proximity, to death, to disease, to the kind of rot that never quite goes away. He wakes each day before the sun, not because he is eager, but because the work begins when the animals arrive. Oxen, sheep, sometimes dogs, stripped of life and soon to be stripped of skin. The hides are soaked first in urine, collected from chamber pots, and donated by those who'd rather not ask where it's going. Then they are soaked again in a thick, chalky mix of lime and water, a solution that burns the eyes and eats the nails from his fingers, but loosens the hair from the skin. He scrapes it off with a dull blade, hunched over a slab of stone that smells of centuries. The hair is piled to the side, and the hide, if it's still usable, moves on to another bath, this time in a stew of animal brains. Or if the shop is poor, dung. That is not metaphor. It is literal. The softened leather needs enzymes, and those enzymes come from what no one else wants. He stirs the hides with a wooden pole, the fumes rising in warm waves, thick enough to make the room spin. There is no mask, no gloves, just ragged fabric and old prayers. By midday, he is dizzy. His stomach clenches, but he does not vomit. He hasn't eaten since yesterday. The smell makes food unthinkable. And even if he could afford bread, no one will serve him. He eats alone, or not at all. The final stage of the process is drying. The hides are stretched and hung like ghostly sails between wooden posts, and he watches them through slitted eyes, knowing that if they fall, if they crease, if they spoil, the master will blame him. He has no say in the matter, no defense, just an open hand and the hope the blow is not too hard. This is not the life he wanted. But who in his village dreams of becoming a tanner? No one. That's why the job is his. Because he was born to a family with no land, no name, and no power. Because his older brother inherited the tiny patch of dirt they called a field. Because he was too small for war, too weak for mining, too plain for the church. And so they brought him to the edge of the river, to the place where the hides are piled high and the ground never dries. And they said, "This is where you'll earn your bread." There was no choice. There was only stink and silence and long days of peeling skin from skin. At night, he sleeps near the vats. On a bed of straw, he covers with discarded rags. He does not dream. Or if he does, he cannot remember. Some say the fumes burn out memory itself. Others say that memory is a luxury for those who live gently. But his hands remember. They twitch in sleep. They cramp. They ache. His joints are beginning to lock, and he is only 30. His teeth are yellow. His nails are black. His eyes water constantly. He has not known what it is to feel clean in years, and yet the town needs him. The Lord wears fine leather boots. The soldiers strap hardened hides over their chests. The priest carries a book bound in supple calfskin. All of it passes through this man's hands, though none would admit it. He is invisible in plain sight, a necessary horror, a reminder that comfort comes at a price. But no one speaks of it. No one thanks him. They wrinkle their noses and look away. And so he continues, day after day, in the cold, in the wet, in the dark. The wind carries the scent of his trade beyond the riverbank. It sticks to the trees. It lingers in the mist. And as you drift further into sleep, into that soft haze where the past seems closer than the present, remember that the worst jobs were not those of glory or violence, but those done quietly, without thanks, by those who had no choice but to endure. And so we begin. There is a hill just outside the village, one that overlooks the churchyard, where the stones lean at odd angles, and the grass grows uneven and wild. Beneath that hill is a structure known by many names, but all of them whispered: charnel house, ossuary, bone room, and the man who works there does not have a name that history remembers. He is the grave reopener, the bone collector, the one summoned not when someone dies, but long after, when the ground needs to be used again. In the medieval world, death did not guarantee permanence, and graves were not sacred forever. When space ran out, as it often did in towns bordered by stone walls and cramped by superstition, the older graves were reopened to make room for the new. That was his job. Not to mourn, not to bless, but to dig. And not into fresh soil, but into the past, into the rot, into the long decayed remains of those who had been buried with ceremony and now were disturbed in silence. He worked at night sometimes, when the stench was less potent and the air cool enough to still the worst of the flies. With a rusted spade and a lantern swaying from a hook above his shoulder, he would kneel beside a weathered marker, say nothing, and begin to unearth someone who had once been someone. The first few inches were always the hardest. Earth hardened by time, tree roots tangled through centuries of silence. Then came the collapse, the hollow space where a coffin had once held its shape but now gave way beneath his hands. The smell was not of rot. It was of centuries, of mildew, of old wood, of forgotten cloth and brittle bones. He learned to tell the age of a body by the sound it made when the skull rolled free. If it crumbled, it was past its time. If it echoed slightly, hollow but whole, he handled it more carefully. Each piece was lifted with a kind of quiet reverence not born from piety, but from habit. Femurs, ribs, teeth that still clung to jaws. He placed them in a wicker basket lined with sackcloth, carried them to the charnel house, and stacked them among the others, rows and rows, like library shelves of the dead. He did not know most of their names. Sometimes, the bones were marked with a token, a scrap of embroidery, a rusted brooch, a coin slipped into the mouth. But most were nameless. Ashes returned to earth, and then pulled back into the air. The villagers rarely spoke to him. Some crossed themselves when he passed. Others spat. He did not eat with them. He did not join festivals. He was tolerated the way mold was tolerated on damp walls. Unsightly, unpleasant, but necessary. No one wanted to see what he did, but they all knew the churchyard had limits. And when the bells tolled again, and another body arrived in a wooden box, someone had to make room. He had no apprentice. No one wanted to learn. When he became too old to climb the hill, the priest would sigh and choose another poor soul. Usually a criminal given reprieve in exchange for labor, or a man with no kin to complain. But for now, it was still him. The work changed him. His hands were always dirty. No matter how often he washed, the grime remained under his nails, in the lines of his palms, in the cracks of his knuckles. His nose grew numb to the smell, but his clothes never did. He wore the same tunic each night, layered over with a cloak that once belonged to someone wealthier, now faded and frayed. His eyes were pale and sunken from years of peering into shadows. He spoke little, but he listened. To the wind, to the soft shifting of earth, to the occasional creak of a coffin lid disturbed by settling soil. There were no ghosts, not in the way stories tell, just silence, heavy, persistent, blanketing him like fog. And in that silence, he found a kind of rhythm. Dig, sort, stack, repeat. He learned to fear not the dead, but the living, especially those who watched him work too closely, those who asked too many questions, those who treated him not with disdain, but with interest. Interest was dangerous. It led to orders, and orders led to graves that were still too fresh. Once, he had been asked to remove a body buried by mistake. Wrong faith, wrong side, wrong name. And the digging that night felt like a violation even he wasn't ready for. He did it, of course. He always did it, because the work wasn't about belief. It was about necessity. And the dead did not argue. They simply shifted, settled, and made space. The charnel house filled slowly. Skulls on one side, long bones on another. The walls were lined with reminders that time was not kind, that even in death, peace was conditional. And when he finished each night, when the last bone was stacked and the last grave tamped shut, he would sit on the edge of the hill and breathe the cold air. Not because he was finished, but because he needed to. Remember, He was still alive, just barely, just enough. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the wind whispered through the leaning stones, he would close his eyes and wonder if one day someone like him would dig him up, hold his skull in their hands, and say nothing at all. In the heart of a cramped medieval town, where streets were barely wide enough for two carts to pass, and the air was heavy with soot and sweat, there was a figure whose presence was known more by sound than by sight. The town crier, but not the one with cheerful news or royal proclamations. This one dealt in darker fare. His job was to announce death sentences, to call out names of those condemned, and to summon the town to executions, floggings, or public shame. He did not wear fine clothes or carry a polished bell. His voice was not a gift, but a weapon, sharpened by repetition and hardened by indifference. He had learned not to flinch when people wept at the sound of their names. That was part of the job. He rose before the sun and walked through cobbled streets with a scroll in one hand and a staff in the other. The staff was more for protection than show. Sometimes, when he read out a name, the family would follow him, shouting or begging or throwing rotten fruit. He could not stop. He could not skip names. That was the rule. The town had to know. The sentence had to be public. And he was the voice of that final, terrible truth. The worst days were execution days. He would stand at the edge of the market square, surrounded by merchants who knew better than to comment, and shout for the townsfolk to gather. He did not describe the crime. That was for the judge or the priest. His job was simpler, colder. At midday, by order of the magistrate, Willem son of Art shall hang for theft of church property. And then he moved on, no flourish, no emotion, just a name and a sentence and the scrape of his boots on stone as he walked to the next square, the next street, the next corner, where someone would look up from their bread or their broom and feel the day sour in their mouth. He did not like this job, but he had no other. He had once been a scribe until a tremor in his hand made his letters shake and smudge. He had tried to beg, but his voice was too harsh, and so they made use of what he had left. A loud voice, a tolerance for hate, and no family to protect. They said it was better to be feared than forgotten, but he wasn't so sure. His house was small, close to the edge of town, where smoke from the blacksmith's fire never stopped drifting. He kept his scrolls there, each one a list of names he had spoken, and some he hadn't yet. He reread them sometimes, not out of guilt, out of habit, as if by knowing them he could undo the part he played. But it never worked. The names stayed. The memories stayed. He remembered a girl once, no older than 15, whose name he had cried at dawn. Her mother had screamed. Her father had tried to hit him. He didn't fight back. What would be the point? He was only the voice, not the reason, not the blade. And yet, it didn't matter. In their eyes, he was the one who killed her. And maybe, in a way, he was. Words carry weight, especially when they're the last ones spoken before the rope tightens or the torch is lit. Children feared him. They said he brought bad luck. Some believed that if he called your name 3 times, death would follow. He never corrected them. Superstition was safer than understanding, and if they avoided him, all the better. He had nothing to offer them anyway. No stories, no toys, just a satchel of parchment and a voice that cracked when he tried to sing. On the worst days, he wondered what would happen if he simply stopped, if he stayed in bed and let the town fall silent. But he knew the answer. They would find someone else, and him? He'd be on someone else's scroll, and someone else's voice would cry his name. So he rose, every day, whether he wanted to or not. He dipped his quill when the ink ran dry. He brushed ash from his sleeves. He cleared his throat and walked the same paths he had walked for years. Watched the same shutters close as he passed, felt the same stones shift under his heels. And when he stood in the square and opened his mouth, the world paused, just for a moment, to listen. Not to him, but to the sentence he carried, to the fear that followed. And when he was done, and the echoes faded, he was left alone with the silence he never got used to. The silence of being a messenger no one wanted to see. A man with a voice, but no one who wanted to hear it unless it brought bad news. And in that silence, as the crowd dispersed and the condemned waited in their cells, he folded the scroll, pressed it to his chest, and walked home. One more name spoken. One more day survived. One more footstep in a life spent carrying fear. At the edge of the battlefield, long after the trumpets have fallen silent and the banners hang limp with blood and dust, there walks a man whose job begins only after the fighting ends. He is not a soldier, not a healer, not a priest offering last rites. He is the gatherer, the corpse collector, the man who walks among the dead and makes sense of the ruin left behind. He carries no weapon. His tunic is simple, stained at the knees, and his boots are thick with dried mud that hides the color of whatever lies beneath. The sun is low now, casting a red hue across the broken plain, and the wind moves in whispers as if the earth itself is trying not to remember. His breath is shallow, not from fear, but from the smell of iron, of waste, of rot. He ties a cloth around his face, but it does little. The scent is not just in the air. It's in the soil, in his skin, in everything. He carries a cart with one wheel that squeals each time it rolls over something too soft, and a hook used for dragging when the bodies are too heavy to lift. There is no honor in his work, no glory, no ceremony. His job is simple: clear the field, remove the dead before they draw wolves or plague, sort the living from the nearly dead, salvage what gear he can for the quartermaster. He does not know the names of the fallen. He does not ask. Names belong to those who lived with hope, and there is no hope here. Only limbs twisted in impossible angles, mouths frozen mid-scream, eyes wide and unblinking beneath smeared helmets. He steps over them carefully, not out of reverence, but out of caution. A misplaced footstep can crush a hidden blade, or worse, reveal something not quite dead. The wounded are the hardest, the ones who moan softly when he leans down, the ones who whisper for mothers or gods or mercy. He gives them water if he has any left. A few drops, that's all he can offer, The healers will come later, if they come at all. Sometimes, he finds men pretending to be dead, hoping to avoid capture or a second fight. He sees them breathing shallowly, hears the faint shift of fabric. He marks their locations and moves on. If they live, they'll crawl. If not, they've made their peace. He has seen it all before. He stopped reacting a long time ago. Screams don't stir him. Vomit doesn't faze him. He has stepped in things that no one should have to step in. Pulled bodies from ditches where the water turned black. Rolled over corpses bloated and green and crawling with movement. Once, he found a boy, no more than 12, still gripping a wooden sword, eyes closed like he'd fallen asleep. He wrapped him in a blanket and left him under a tree. No cart, no hook, just a little dignity. The captain said it was a waste of space. He didn't argue. What would be the point? His job wasn't to question, just to clear the field. And so, he moved, slowly, methodically, from one end to the other, piling the dead into rows, stripping valuables to be logged later, cutting off fingers still bearing rings, not out of cruelty, but because swollen hands don't let go. He keeps the pouches separate. Coins, pendants, letters. Most of it will never return to the families. The officers take their share. The rest vanishes. Once, he kept a letter. Not to steal it, but because it wasn't addressed. Just a scrap of parchment with a name and a prayer. He read it once, then burned it. Not from guilt, but from fear. Fear that if he kept enough of them, the weight would follow him into sleep. And his sleep is already thin. Broken by memories he doesn't want to keep, and sounds he cannot forget. The gurgle of a throat trying to breathe through blood. The wet snap of a limb giving way. The hush that comes when you turn a body and realize it's not one body, but two. He finishes near sundown. The cart is full. The field is clearer now, though not clean. It never is. Bones will surface for months. Dogs will dig. Rain will uncover what he missed. But for tonight, it is enough. He pulls the cart toward the trench dug beyond the trees, where smoke already rises and the flames wait. Not every body will burn tonight. Some will be buried, others left to the elements, but some must be destroyed, especially those whose wounds look wrong. Too many holes, too much foam, too little blood. Plague, infection, things that can't be named but must be feared. He doesn't flinch, just empties the cart, one body at a time, then wipes his hands on the grass and stares into the fire. Not for meaning, just for warmth. It is the only thing that cuts through the chill in his bones. He sleeps in a shed near the stables, away from the others. No one invites him to eat. No one thanks him, but they don't stop him either. They know the work must be done. They just don't want to see it. And so he continues, day after day, battlefield after battlefield, carrying the dead so the living can forget them. That is his burden. That is his job. And it is terrifying not because of what he sees, but because of how much he has stopped feeling down in the dim, winding tunnels beneath a crumbling fortress, where air grows thick and the torchlight dances on slick stone walls. there exists a place the world above prefers not to acknowledge, the dungeon. And within it, tending to the prisoners with iron tools and quiet orders, works the jailer, the keeper of keys, the man who does not speak unless he must. His world is measured not in hours, but in echoes, not in sunlight, but in screams that rise and fall like tides. He does not wear armor. He does not carry a sword. He has no sigil on his chest. What he has is a ring of keys, rusted but sharp-edged, each one shaped by years of use, and a familiarity with suffering that most cannot comprehend. He was not born to this life. No one is. But he found his way into the dungeon through necessity, through war, debt, or disgrace. He cannot even remember which now. The air here smells of mold and waste, of rust and wet stone. It is always damp, always dark. The torches are changed sparingly, and even when they burn, they cast more shadow than light. The prisoners are lined in cells, some silent, others muttering, some awake, others lost to madness. He knows them all, not their crimes, but their sounds. The way the one in the third cell scrapes his nails across the wall every few minutes. The rhythm of the old woman's cough in the corner cell. The breathing patterns of those who still sleep or pretend to. He does not ask questions. He is not the judge, nor the priest, nor the executioner. He is simply the bridge between silence and pain, the one who opens the door when ordered, the one who delivers food, removes bodies, or tightens restraints. The worst days are the days of interrogation, when men with clean hands and cold eyes descend from the upper floors carrying leather satchels and quiet voices. The jailer prepares the room. He heats the irons, checks the ropes, clears the old blood if he has time. If not, it doesn't matter. The floor is already stained beyond saving. He is not asked to watch, but he does. Not out of cruelty, but out of habit. He needs to know what's been done. Who will need bandages? Who will need burial? Who will scream and who will not? The ones who do not scream are the worst. Their silence settles into the walls and stays there, hanging long after the iron has cooled. The jailer does not enjoy the work, but he does it well. Because in the dungeon, efficiency means survival. A prisoner left untended can die too soon. A restraint too loose invites escape. A door unlocked spells disaster. He sleeps in a room just beyond the last cell, on a straw mat beside a table where his tools are kept. Not just shackles and hooks, but water jugs, spare cloths, a ledger marked with names he doesn't understand. Some are crossed out. Others are circled. He never asks why. There is no one to ask. Sometimes he dreams of stairs, endless stairs, spiraling up into a place with air that smells clean and sky that never disappears. But then he wakes to the drip of water and the groan of shifting stone, and the dream fades. Visitors come rarely. When they do, they speak in clipped tones, their robes too fine for the filth around them. They speak of politics, heresy, betrayal. They hand over names like coins. The jailer does not respond. He takes the names, adds them to the ledger, and waits. Sometimes The new prisoners cry when they see the cells. Others laugh, some beg, some promise gold, or favors, or revenge. He listens, but it changes nothing. The cell doors are heavy. The locks snap shut like jaws. And once they're inside, they belong to the dark. He does what he must, feeds them when ordered, removes waste, carries corpses when needed. His hands are strong, but his back aches now, and his knees crack when he walks. The damp has settled into his bones. He no longer notices the smell. When he was younger, it made him retch. Now, it just is. Part of him. Like the silence. Like the cold. There are rumors, always, that he was once a criminal himself. That he chose this life over the gallows. He never confirms or denies. Let them believe what they want. It keeps questions away. At night, he sometimes hums. Not songs he remembers, just patterns of sound to keep the voices from settling too deeply in his head. The dungeon listens. It always does. He has seen men break from the silence alone. No need for blades, just time, just darkness, just the slow unraveling of the self. He wonders, some nights, if he is broken too. If the quiet has eaten away something vital inside him. But then he hears the rattle of chains, a cough, a sob, and he rises, lights another torch, checks the locks, makes sure the shadows stay where they belong. Because down here, beneath the stone and the memory of sunlight, the jailer is not just a man. He is the last line between order and the madness that waits when all other doors are closed. And so he remains, not for justice, not for duty, but because someone must. Along the winding path between towns, just beyond the last row of thatched roofs and stone walls, there walks a man. Most hope never to meet, but all know must exist. The leech collector, the blood man, the one who gathers the creatures that squirm and cling and drink. His job is as ancient as belief itself, and nearly as cursed. The leeches are used by physicians, by barber surgeons, by monks with trembling hands who still think balance can be restored by draining what the body holds. And to drain the blood, you need the leeches. And to get the leeches, you need someone willing to step into the swamps, barefoot and bare-legged, with a bucket in one hand and scars layered over scars. He wears no boots. He can't. The leeches won't latch through leather. They need skin, soft, warm, blood-filled. And so, day after day, this man wades into the mire, into the still black water where frogs croak and insects hum, and the mud grips like hands trying to pull him under. He walks slowly, shins exposed, sometimes up to his knees, feeling the first bite like a sting, then another, and another, until his legs are a forest of feeding mouths. He waits. Stand still as the welts grow. Some leeches are small and quick. Others grow heavy, bloated, pulsing with his blood, before he pulls them free and drops them into the wooden pail. He does not flinch, not anymore. The pain is sharp at first, then dull, then something deeper, a cold that seeps up from the bite and spreads inward. Infection is a constant risk. He rubs his legs with vinegar when he returns home, or salt if he has any left. and binds the wounds with whatever cloth is clean enough. But still, the fever comes sometimes. The redness, the swelling, the aching that makes him limp for days. And yet, he returns, because there is no one else who will do it. The apothecaries and surgeons pay in coin or bread. Or, if they're feeling kind, a bit of dried meat. It's not much, but it's more than begging, more than starving. And in a world where being poor is a sentence in itself, the leech collector clings to his work like a raft in stormy water. People see him and look away. They smell the bog on his clothes, the iron-sweet tang of his own blood, and they cross themselves or mutter prayers. Some say he's cursed. Others say he's not fully human anymore, that the leeches have taken part of him with every feeding. He says nothing, just limps to the back doors of the infirmaries, drops off his pail, and waits in silence while they count the squirming prizes. He knows which leeches the doctors prefer. The fat black ones, the long brown ones with red underbellies, the green ones that leave a mark like a flower blooming in flesh. He knows how to handle them, how to coax them off gently so they don't regurgitate their meal and die. His hands are careful, steady, though swollen at the knuckles and cracked at the fingertips. No gloves, of course. The creatures must feel him, smell him, trust him. They cling to him like old friends, and sometimes, in his loneliest hours, he almost thinks of them that way. Not fondly, not lovingly, but familiarly. They are the only living things that truly seek him out. He does not sleep well. At night, his legs itch with ghost bites. His dreams are full of water, thick and black, rising up to swallow him. He sometimes wakes with a cry and checks his legs in the dark, half expecting to find them covered again. But there is nothing, just the scars and the ache. He keeps to himself, lives in a shack near the marsh where the ground never dries and the roof leaks in 4 places. Children dare each other to knock on his door and run. He never answers. He doesn't need to. He knows what they think. He hears the stories they whisper, that he drinks the blood himself, that he keeps leeches as pets, that he has no soul left, only holes. Let them talk. Their parents will buy his catch soon enough, desperate to cure a fever, to treat swelling, to rebalance the humors of a sick loved one. And they will not ask where the leeches came from. They will not ask whose blood fed them first. They will simply place them on flesh and hope for healing. That is the cruel symmetry of his work. His suffering becomes medicine. His blood becomes hope. But no one thanks him. No one ever has. And so he returns, every morning, to the cold grip of the swamp, to the silent hunger of the creatures waiting beneath the surface, and he stands there, motionless as the bites begin anew. This is his place. This is his trade. This is the most terrifying job no one wants to know about, because it reminds them that beneath all their medicine, all their cures, lies a man ankle-deep in rot, bleeding quietly so that others may live. In the dense, silent forests on the edge of known land, where the trees crowd in so tightly that sunlight touches the ground only in broken fragments, there is a man who walks alone, watching the undergrowth not for berries or game, but for signs of death. He is the plague watcher, the death marker, the one sent ahead when rumors stir of sickness in a distant village. when smoke no longer rises from chimneys, when birds fall silent in the trees. His role is simple in theory: find the sick, mark the dead, report back. But in practice, it is far more terrible. He travels alone, always, because no one dares accompany him. His clothes are soaked in vinegar. His sleeves are stuffed with dried herbs, crumbled and bitter, tucked into folds and cuffs in the desperate hope they will keep the death from seeping in. A scarf covers his mouth, tied so tight it leaves grooves in his cheeks by nightfall. His boots are thick, his gloves layered, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line for movement, not of wolves or bandits, but of stumbling shapes with hollow coughs and too bright eyes. The forest is his companion. The stillness, his warning. When birdsong stops completely, he knows he is close. The first village he ever entered was small, barely more than a few huts and a chapel leaning slightly to one side. He remembered the silence before he saw anything. The unnatural, smothered silence, like the world was holding its breath. And then the smell. Not death exactly, but sickness. A sweet, rotting musk that clung to the walls, soaked into thatch, and lingered in the spaces where voices should have been. He knocked on doors he did not expect answers from. He opened them slowly. Inside were bodies, twisted where they fell, some covered in blankets, others in blood. Flies moved in thick clouds. The windows were shuttered. Food lay rotting in bowls. He did not speak. He could not. His voice felt too loud, too alive. Instead, he marked the doors with a mixture of ash and chalk, a sign that the plague had come, that the living should not enter. He recorded each death in a small book, bound in leather, its pages stiff with dried sweat and rain. Names if he found them, numbers when he couldn't, and always a note of what he saw: blackened buboes, blood from the mouth, fever-mad eyes staring from still faces. He burned nothing. That was not his role. Others came later with torches and shovels and fear. His job was only to go first, to face what no one else would, and return to speak of it, if he returned. Sometimes he stayed on the edge of town, sleeping beneath trees with his scarf still tied, his gloves still on, hoping that the sickness would not drift through the forest to find him. He washed in streams, scoured his skin raw with salt when he had it, and still, he felt the phantom itch behind his ears, the ghost of a cough in his throat. Fear was constant. He carried it with him like a second cloak. Not the panic of the villagers, not the frenzy of the dying, but a low, steady hum in his bones that never went silent. He never stayed long anywhere. Even the healthy towns did not want him. They fed him through shutters, spoke to him from behind fences. Children were told not to look him in the eye. He became a symbol, not of safety, but of the storm that followed. The plague watched through him, and so he moved, always, from one place to the next, always behind death, never ahead of it. Once, he found a village that had locked its own gates. Everyone inside had agreed to stay, to die together if needed. He watched through the gaps in the wood as figures passed by windows, faces pale, hands waving not for help, but farewell. He left them untouched, marked them as unvisited. He could not bring himself to walk through that gate. The hardest part was the children, the way their limbs curled, the way their eyes remained open, still bright, with something that refused to fade. He wrote their names slower, carved tiny crosses beside them, but it changed nothing. The work had to be done. The record had to be kept. He has no friends, no family left. They died long ago, before he began this work. Perhaps that is why he was chosen. Perhaps that is why he accepts it. Each morning, he wakes before dawn, checks the state of his boots, counts the supplies in his satchel: chalk, ash, vinegar, dried herbs, and always a spare scarf. Then he sets off again into another day that might be his last. The wind speaks to him sometimes, carries whispers from villages he has not yet reached. He listens. He follows. And when he sees the first signs, an abandoned cart, a line of laundry untouched for too long, a door left swinging open, he knows. The plague has come again, and he walks into it, quietly, alone, because someone must know. Someone must bear witness. Even when the world prefers to forget, in the barren stretch of countryside between scattered settlements, where trees grow stunted from wind and the soil crunches underfoot like old bones, there rides a figure most travelers pretend not to see, though they feel his presence long before he appears. He is the Sin Eater, cloaked in faded wool and silence, the one summoned not for weddings or baptisms or the celebration of life, but for its bitter end. His task is ancient, older than most churches, whispered through generations and half denied by priests who condemn the ritual, yet look away when it serves their needs. When someone dies, and their soul is thought to carry unconfessed sins, too poor to buy forgiveness, too sudden to be shriven, a sin eater is called, not to pray, not to comfort, but to consume. The meal is left on the chest of the dead: bread, salt, and ale, or whatever scraps the family can spare. It is not meant to nourish. It is meant to carry, to draw the sin from the flesh, from the heart, from the soul, still hovering near the body. The sin eater kneels, says nothing, and eats, slowly, deliberately, with eyes half closed and hands steady. No one watches closely. No one dares. The act is both sacred and profane, a strange middle place between curse and salvation. Some believe he takes the sins into his own soul, that each bite blackens a part of him, weighs him down until he walks half in shadow. Others say the ritual is symbolic, nothing more than a gesture to ease the grieving. But no one wants to test the theory. They pay him in silence, in coins that are never touched twice, in food left on doorsteps, never handed directly. He does not speak unless spoken to. He does not linger. When the meal is done, he stands, nods once, and disappears down the road before the air can grow thick with questions. He has no home, or perhaps he has many. A cot in a barn, a cave near the hills, a patch of dry earth beneath a broken tree. The dogs do not bark at him. The crows do not scatter when he passes. Even nature, it seems, knows what he is. His appearance shifts with the years. Once tall and strong, now stooped and wiry, his beard untrimmed, his boots cracked, his eyes dulled from carrying what others could not. He has eaten the sins of thieves, of murderers, of children too young to speak. He has sat beside stillborn infants and weathered fathers, beside women whose faces were veiled even in death. Each one leaves a mark, not visible, but felt, in his bones, in his breath, in the way he flinches at certain prayers and avoids looking into mirrors. He remembers the first time, a village girl, pale and still, her mother sobbing as he was led into the room. He had not known what to do. An old man whispered the right in his ear, trembling with fear or guilt or both. And he had eaten the bread, each crumb sticking in his throat like thorns. When he left, the air felt heavier, and the road behind him stretched longer than it had before. It has never felt short since. Children say he eats more than sin, that he consumes the final thoughts, the regrets, the secrets of the dead, that he knows what they were too afraid to say aloud. He never confirms this, but he has looked into the eyes of mourners and said a name they hadn't spoken in years, or repeated a phrase the dead used often. He says it was a guess, but the grieving pale and look away. He keeps no record, no list of names, no tally of sin. That is not his duty. He is not a priest. He is not a judge. He is a vessel, a shadow with a mouth. And though the people fear him, they need him. For there is comfort in knowing someone will come when the church refuses, when the soul is too heavy to rise. He has seen more death than most soldiers, but none of it in battle. His deaths are quiet, still, wrapped in linen and regret. And every time he walks away, he feels the burden settle deeper into his spine. There is no reward, no redemption, just the road and the silence and the constant taste of salt on his tongue. He wonders sometimes who will eat his sins when his time comes, if anyone will brave the fear, the revulsion, the weight, or if he will be left unmarked, his soul wandering for eternity, bloated with the sins of others and his own left to fester. But he cannot dwell on it. There is always another village, another bell tolling, another meal waiting on the chest of someone who died alone, afraid, unfinished. And so he walks, slow and quiet, through the fields and the woods and the narrow lanes where no one greets him. He eats, he leaves, he forgets, until the next name is whispered in fear and he is summoned again. Because sin does not rest, and someone must carry it. In the narrow streets of the city, where shadows stretched long between leaning buildings and the stones beneath your feet were slick with the filth of thousands, there moved a figure in dark robes, half hidden by the steam that rose from boiling pots and the stench that clung to everything. He was not a cook, not a merchant, not a priest. He was the executioner, the man who ended lives in the name of law, whose hands bore the weight of justice and dread in equal measure. His was not a job granted with ceremony or respect. It was assigned usually to someone with little choice. A criminal offered reprieve in exchange for a lifetime of killing. A debt-ridden man with no family left. A volunteer maybe, but never truly willing. No one chose this life. They fell into it. The tools of his trade were few but terrible. A broad axe, heavy and nicked. A rope worn smooth from countless knots. A wheel, a blade, a torch. He kept them all himself. Maintained them in secret. Not because he valued them, but because no one else would touch them. They were cursed, some said, soaked in the souls of the condemned. And maybe they were. The executioner lived apart from the rest, usually in a hut near the walls or a shack by the gallows, a place where even stray dogs hesitated. Children ran when they saw him. Adults pretended not to. He wore a hood, not to hide, but because people expected it, because it was easier for them if they never saw his face, never imagined that the hand swinging the axe belonged to someone who bled and wept and felt. The morning of a scheduled execution began early. He would rise in darkness, eat nothing, drink only water. He did not pray. There were no prayers for men like him. Instead, he checked the blade, tested the rope, inspected the wood of the scaffold. The crowd would gather before the sun had fully risen. A sea of faces, eager for spectacle, eyes hungry for a kind of justice that looked too much like entertainment. They called out names. They shouted for blood. They cheered when he appeared. He never looked at them, never acknowledged them. His focus was on the condemned, each one different, and yet the same. Some wept, some begged, some cursed, some stood silently, their eyes locked on the sky. He did not speak to them unless required. When he did, his voice was quiet, firm, detached. Kneel, breathe. It will be quick. He tried to keep his promises. He aimed for the neck with precision. A clean cut was a kindness. A messy one was a nightmare. The worst were the ones who moved, or those who resisted, flailing against ropes or collapsing mid-step. He still remembered a man who turned just before the blade fell. How the cut missed, how the scream tore through the morning air, how the second blow landed too late. The sound haunted him, not because of guilt, he had none left, but because of what it meant. That even now, after all this time, he could still fail. And failure in this work was unforgettable. He performed hangings too, adjusting the knot to make the death quicker if he could. If the fall was too short, the neck did not break, and the death was long and choking. If the rope was too long, the head could separate. He learned through trial, through whispered instruction from older executioners long dead or disappeared. No one trained him formally. No one dared. When the work was done, and the body hung limp or lay crumpled on the scaffold, he did not linger. He wiped the blade. He unhooked the rope. He stepped away from the crowd's roar, the applause, the morbid laughter, and he returned to his hut, alone, always alone. He had no friends, no visitors. The local priest passed him on the road without a word. The tavern refused to serve him. If he needed bread, he left coin on the doorstep and took what was left overnight. No one touched what he touched, not out of cruelty, out of fear. They believed death followed him. And perhaps it did. He rarely slept well. His dreams were full of faces, not the dying, but the living, the watching, the eager mouths and shining eyes of those who came to see a man die, like others might attend a festival. That was the part that chilled him. Not the execution, but the crowd. Their joy, their bloodlust. He wondered sometimes if he was the only one who felt sorrow at the scaffold, if his silence was mourning while theirs was glee. But he said nothing, kept moving, kept doing the job no one else would touch, because the law demanded blood, and someone had to deliver it. He was the hand of the sentence, the final step after judgment, and though the city shunned him, it needed him, desperately, quietly, until the next name was called, and the hood was drawn once more. High in the towers where no music plays, and the cold seeps in through every crack in the stone, there lives a figure hunched and silent, surrounded by ropes and bells and dust that never settles. He is the bell ringer, the toller of the dead, the voice of iron that echoes through village and valley to mark both life and its vanishing. His is not a position of celebration, not in this age. He does not ring for weddings or for spring festivals, not anymore. He rings for funerals, for warnings, for the slow, measured beat that tells the town another soul has slipped into the beyond. It is not the noise that haunts him. It's the waiting. The long stretches of stillness between the tolls, where he sits alone beneath wooden beams scorched with old lightning, watching the world from above like a forgotten god. He does not speak often. His voice is low, roughened from disuse and the cold air that wraps around his throat each morning. His hands are calloused from rope burn. His back is twisted from years of pulling, of leaning into the motion of the bell as if it were something alive, something that might resist him if he dared hesitate. The bell itself is massive, older than memory, its inscription worn smooth, its sound a deep, low hum that moves through the bones of the village like a ghost. No one else comes up to the tower. The stairs are too steep, the air too thin, the job too lonely. They send messages instead, scraps of parchment pinned to the inside of the chapel door, bearing names, dates, sometimes causes. He reads them by candlelight, traces each letter slowly, then waits. He knows the rituals. 3 slow tolls for a child, 4 for a woman, 5 for a man, 12 at midnight for plague. He rings them all, precisely, without error, without fail, because to ring incorrectly is to dishonor the dead, and though few speak of it, he believes they listen. The dead, that is, they hear the bells, they count the notes, and they wait for that final sound to carry them on. He does not remember when he started this work. He only remembers that he never left it. The years blur together, one name followed by another, one funeral after the next. The seasons pass above and below him, but he remains, like the bell, fixed in place. He has outlived priests, outlasted wars, buried more villagers in memory than anyone else alive. His fingers tremble now, not from fear, from age, but still he pulls the ropes. Still he climbs the stairs each morning. Still he listens for the signal, sometimes a knock, sometimes the caw of a crow at the wrong hour, sometimes just a silence that settles over the town like frost. He knows when death has come before others do. The air changes, the light shifts. He can feel it in the ropes, in the beams, in the hush of the stones. And when it does, He tolls the bell. Once, twice, however many times the ritual demands. He has no apprentice. The townspeople assume someone will replace him when he dies, but they never think of who, or how, or why anyone would want to. The tower is cold, even in summer. The bell deafens if not treated with care, and the loneliness is a kind that digs in deep and does not let go. He once tried to leave, long ago. Climbed down the stairs, packed what little he owned, made it as far as the chapel gates before the bells began ringing on their own. Just once. Just one long, mournful note that shook the roof tiles and silenced the birds. No one else heard it. But he did, and he turned back. Ever since, he has not left. Not truly. He walks sometimes at dawn, when the frost still clings to the grass. His footsteps slow, measured, unnoticed. The townspeople nod politely. No one speaks to him for long. They believe he sees too much, that he hears whispers no one else can, that his soul is half bound to the bell tower, and the other half waits quietly in the churchyard beneath the yew trees. Perhaps they are right. He no longer dreams of anything but ringing, of ropes that fray and bells that fall, of sound that carries into a world beyond the sky. He keeps a journal, written in cramped lines and old ink, filled with names and dates and notes no one will ever read. It is not for memory. It is for the dead, so that someone remembers, so that someone cares. He will toll the bell until he can no longer climb. And when that day comes, he will leave the rope tied, stretched tight, one final message. And the bell will ring without hands, without wind, without warning, just once, for him, and the tower will fall silent again, waiting, as it always has, for the next soul to guide onward, far beyond the warmth of the hearth, in the murmur of village gossip. Out where the land turns to salt and wind, there toils a man, wrapped in linen and silence, a figure bent beneath a burden, both literal and unseen. He is the lime burner, keeper of the quicklime pits, the one who feeds the kilns that hiss and scream, and whose work stains the very air he breathes. His days begin not with roosters or church bells, but with the groan of shifting stone, the clatter of broken limestone dumped beside the furnace, and the dull ache in his ribs from nights spent too close to the fire. The kiln is a great, gaping mouth, built from blackened brick. Its belly, hungry for stone and timber and flesh-like heat. To feed it is to court pain. The lime must be crushed first, broken with hammers until the dust rises in clouds so thick it stings the eyes and scalds the lungs. The white powder sticks to his skin like snow, but it burns instead of chills, and no amount of cloth can keep it out. It eats through fabric. It seeps into pores. The men who last more than a year in this work carry scars on their arms, on their backs, in their throats, where the coughing never quite stops. The fire must be kept hot and constant. There are no breaks. The stone must cook for days, nights, until it glows pale and deadly, transformed into a substance so caustic it will melt flesh if touched too soon. He uses a long-handled iron rake to stir it, but even then his hands blister through the gloves. He sweats, not from heat alone, but from fear. Fear that the kiln will collapse, that the fumes will overwhelm him, that he will trip and fall forward and vanish into the inferno like those before him. Because they do not speak of it often, but every lime pit has its ghosts. Workers who slipped, who grew dizzy, who lost their footing, and whose bones were never quite recovered. The lime consumes, it cleanses, it leaves behind no trace. The same quicklime used for mortar, for plaster, for binding stone, is also used to destroy the scent of death, to cover the bodies of plague victims, to fill the mass graves behind monasteries and city walls. He has delivered it himself, sacks of powder dragged on carts to places where priests no longer go, and mourners weep from a distance. He knows what they use it for, and he knows what it costs. He smells of lime, always. Even when he bathes in a river water so cold it steals the breath from his lungs. The scent clings in his hair, in his mouth, on his skin. It marks him. The villagers don't shun him, exactly, but they keep their distance. Children watch him from behind fences. Dogs bark and then whimper. No one invites him to supper. No one asks his name. He doesn't blame them. He wouldn't trust himself either. He eats alone with hands that tremble from exhaustion, tearing stale bread with fingers raw and pink at the tips. His dreams are bright, not with light, but with the flash of flames when they burst too high, with the eerie glow of lime as it cracks and settles, hissing like a thing alive. He has no family left, no wife, no letters, only a small wooden hut with a cot, a bucket, and a shelf where he keeps stones that caught his eye, those that broke strangely, or shimmered, or resembled faces worn by wind. They are his only company, that and the fire. Always the fire. He knows the schedules by heart. When to add wood, when to stir, when to risk a glance into the white-hot mouth of the kiln. He works through storms, through fevers, through the tremors in his limbs when the dust gets too deep in his lungs. He has tried to leave, once, years ago, but the world outside did not feel real anymore. It was too soft, too bright, too filled with people who laughed without coughing, who touched one another without flinching. He didn't know how to join them. So he returned, back to the kiln, back to the work, because while the job terrified him, the silence beyond it terrified him more. He doesn't think of the future. There is no pension, no retirement. He will work until his hands can no longer hold the hammer, until his breath rattles too loudly to ignore, until someone else takes his place, or the kiln collapses and buries them both. And when that day comes, he hopes the fire will be quick, that he will not feel it, that he will vanish into the heat, into the dust, into the substance that has already claimed so much of him. The lime will eat what's left. There will be no burial, no marker, just the hiss of steam and the slow cooling of stone, and the kiln, still hungry, waiting for the next man to feed it, deep within the tangled belly of the earth, where the sun has never reached, and the walls drip with sweat drawn from stone itself. A man swings a pick into darkness, over and over, in the narrowest crawl space imaginable. He is the mine crawler, the rat man, the one sent into shafts too small, too risky, too cruel for others. The official term is narrow vein miner, but no one uses that. They call him what he is, a shadow with a lungs full of dust, whose job begins where others end. He works flat on his belly, or hunched so low he cannot lift his head. The space around him is barely wider than his own chest, the ceiling just inches above his skull. He does not stand for hours at a time. His back bends in shapes it was not meant to. His knees and elbows are calloused beyond recognition. He breathes shallowly, not from fear, but because the air is thick with powder and fine silt, and deep breaths make him choke. The mine above is bustling, carts rattle, hammers clang, men shout. But down here it is silence and pressure and the occasional dull crack that may or may not be the stone giving way. The deeper he crawls, the older the supports become. Some are rotting, some have shifted, some creak like old bones. He has seen what happens when they fail. The rock doesn't scream. It just closes in, silently, a shuddering breath from the earth that seals everything forever. He carries no lantern, just a candle stub mounted on his cap, the light flickering wildly with every breath. The shadows play tricks. He sees faces in the walls, figures in the dust, hears whispers that are just the hiss of gas escaping through fissures. Still, he moves forward, always forward. Because the veins of ore are here down low, in cracks barely visible, where others cannot reach. The mine owners need this work. The towns depend on it, and he is the only one thin enough, small enough, or desperate enough to crawl into these places. His pick is short, almost laughably so. He chips away at stone inch by inch, collecting fragments of silver or tin or whatever the mine demands this month. He has no idea what the metal will be used for. It does not matter. He is paid by the weight, by the bag, and it is never enough. When the bag is full, he drags it backward between his legs, a slow and painful retreat through stone corridors that scrape his skin raw. Then he returns with another empty sack. Again and again. Sometimes he brings chalk to mark the path. Other times, he simply remembers. Turn left at the stone with the crack, right at the puddle that smells like eggs. It is not precise. He has gotten lost before. Once for hours, once for a day. Time does not move properly underground. It compresses, stretches, folds in on itself. Hunger disappears. Thirst becomes sharp. Fatigue is not in the muscles but in the spirit, a weight that grows heavier with every echo. He knows men who went into holes and never came back. He heard the rescue diggers trying, heard the cries, heard the silence that followed. No one speaks of those shafts anymore. They are sealed and marked with chalk skulls. Sometimes he dreams of them, voices beneath the stone, hands scratching from the other side. But he wakes, and there is only darkness. His clothes are threadbare, his gloves patched a dozen times. His fingernails are black. His teeth, once white, are now stained gray. He spits dust. He coughs blood. The doctor says it's nothing. Or more honestly, says nothing at all. Doctors do not come to the mines. The air alone is punishment enough. Every day he breathes rock, and every day he goes deeper. Not because he wants to, because someone has to, because food costs money, because rent doesn't stop. Because once you are small and desperate and willing, they never let you work the safer jobs again. You become the crawler, the shadow, the one who knows the mine like a rat knows its burrow. And when something collapses, when something shifts, they call for you first. You who can fit through the cracks. You who are already half buried. He used to be afraid. Now he just listens. To the stone, to the pressure, to the way the mine breathes. He taps gently before he moves forward. He hums sometimes, not for comfort, but to keep from forgetting he exists. The mine will never sing back, but it will listen. And if you move wrong, it will answer. He knows, one day, he may not crawl back. The shaft may fold, the air may vanish, the light may flicker out, and there will be no rescue. Just silence and the sound of falling dust. But until then, he digs, one chip at a time, one breath at a time, until the sack is full and the crawl begins again, out beyond the edge of the castle walls, past the watchtowers and the blacksmith smoke, down in the marshy fields where the air tastes of iron and the ground sinks under every step. There stands a figure alone at the border between battle and plague, life and death. He is the armor scraper, the filth cleaner, the one who retrieves and purifies the suits of mail and plate from those who did not survive the fight. It is not a glorious job. It is not even a respected one, but it is necessary. Armor is too costly to waste, even if it's soaked in blood, dented by sword blows, or clinging to the stink of rot. It must be salvaged, cleaned, and returned to the next man who will wear it, and perhaps die in it too. He begins at dawn, when the mist still hangs low and the crows are picking over the bodies. He walks slowly across the field with a long hook in one hand and a thick cloth wrapped over his nose and mouth. The stench is unbearable at first, sour, metallic, ripe with a death. But he has learned to breathe shallowly, to let the smell become background, a wall of scent he never tries to pass through. The dead are stiff, their limbs twisted unnaturally. He does not look at faces anymore, just at the armor. He checks for straps, clasps, buckles. Some have to be cut loose, others pried open. Blood has dried in sticky black layers over the steel. Sometimes the pieces are cracked. Sometimes they've been pierced. Sometimes there are fragments of bone still trapped inside. He does not flinch. He lifts the plates one at a time, places them in the cart he drags behind him, and moves to the next. The chainmail is worse. It clings to the body like wet cloth, tangled with hair, sealed to the flesh by time and heat. It has to be peeled away. Sometimes it tears, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the flesh comes with it. He works slowly, methodically. There is no rushing this. The armor must be cleaned, completely. Or the next man who wears it might carry more than just protection. He might carry infection, decay, bad luck. Back at his shed, a lean structure half buried in earth, he boils water in great black kettles. He heats stones and places them in buckets with sand and vinegar. The armor is lowered into the mix, soaked, scoured, and scraped. He uses wire brushes, sharp stones, and sometimes just his fingers when the grime is too stubborn. His nails are always black, his knuckles raw. The skin at his wrists burns from constant exposure. He has no apprentice. No one wants to learn this craft. He mutters to himself as he works, not from madness, but from habit, soft rhythms of counting, whispering the names of tools, reciting prayers half remembered from a time before the armor drowned them. He works into the night, sometimes by torchlight, sometimes by memory alone. The cleaned pieces are stacked carefully by size and damage. They will be taken to the smith for mending or to the garrison for reuse. He is rarely paid in coin. More often, he is given food, bread, cheese, salted meat. It is enough, just enough. But no one sits beside him. No one lingers when he speaks. He has become something of a warning himself, an omen of death and duty. Mothers tell their children not to stare at him. Soldiers joke that the only thing worse than dying in battle is waking up to find him peeling armor from your chest. He hears the jokes. He says nothing, because he has seen too much to laugh. He knows the smell of a wound that never had a chance, the feel of cold steel soaked in lifeblood, the way even the finest armor offers no promise, only a chance. He once wore armor long ago, but it saved no one he cared for. Now, he scrapes it clean for strangers. There is a rhythm to it, a grim sort of peace. Scrub, rinse, boil, sand, repeat. The plates gleam faintly by the end, shining not with pride, but with exhaustion. And he wonders, sometimes, what stories they carry. What last breath, what cry of pain, what prayer whispered behind a visor before the world turned black. But he does not ask. The armor does not answer. It only reflects him in pieces, warped, blurry, burned. And when the next battle comes, and the next wave of broken steel is dragged from the fields, he will be there again, hook in hand, face covered, voice silent. Not to honor the dead, not to bury them, but to make sure the metal they wore can be worn again, to scrape away the evidence, the agony, the blood, until the armor is clean and ready and waiting. In the bleak fields that stretch between the monasteries and the wild, wind-lashed forests, there labors a solitary man with hands stained by ink and silence, a scribe of the dead, a monastic copyist tasked not with preserving holy scripture or poetry, but with recording the deaths of those too poor, too forgotten, or too unloved to have their stories told by anyone else. His cell is small, more stone than shelter, lit only by a slit of light that slices across his work table like a blade each morning. He wakes before the sun, before the bells, before the crows begin their morning calls. His fingers are stiff from the cold, from age, from holding the same reed pen for too many years. The ink is thick, made from oak galls and rusted iron, and it smells like something sour, something dead. He dips the pen and begins the day, not with prayer, but with names. Just names. Sometimes nothing more than that. A woman found by the roadside. a child buried behind the barn, a man no one claimed after the fever passed through. He writes them all in a book that no one reads, on parchment smoothed by a pumice stone until it glows faintly beneath the candlelight. His handwriting is perfect, even when his eyes blur. The lines straight, the letters sharp. It is the only thing left in his life that he can still control. The deaths come to him by word of mouth, by notes slipped under doors, by whispers in the chapel. During the rare moments someone dares speak of the bodies left in ditches or behind locked doors. He does not seek them out. They come to him like ghosts, quietly, persistently. He records more than names. He notes the manner of death if it's known. Fever, wounds, drowning, cold, hunger. He adds a mark beside those who died unnamed, a small cross, no flourish. Just ink on skin stretched from animals, once alive, now part of this strange communion of the forgotten. He does not flinch at the details. He has written about eyes eaten by rats, about tongues blackened by poison, about bones snapped and left in snow. The words come without resistance. His hand moves while his mind is somewhere else, half in prayer, half in memory. Sometimes he pauses, just for a moment, to stare at a name he recognizes. A boy who once ran past his cell door. A woman who once left bread on his windowsill. But he keeps writing, because if he stops, even for a day, the silence grows heavier. The dead deserve to be remembered, even if no one else cares, even if their names are never read aloud. The book is bound in black leather, cracked and worn. He has filled 2 already. The third lies open before him, its first pages already flecked with wax and ash. He does not fear death. He has seen too much of it, felt it pass by his shoulder, like a chill wind, too often to pretend it is anything but natural. What he fears is erasure, the vanishing of lives without memory, of people swallowed by time so completely that even their pain is lost. That is why he writes, not for beauty, not for salvation, but for proof that they lived, that they mattered, that someone remembered, even if only for a moment. His robes are simple, patched and stained. He eats little, bread, root vegetables, sometimes a bit of broth brought by a younger monk who doesn't quite know what to make of him. No one visits for long. His cell smells of ink and mold and sorrow. The other monks avoid the room with the books of the dead. They do not say why. They just glance away when passing, cross themselves, murmur half-formed blessings. He doesn't blame them. He, too, has felt the weight of these names pressing into the walls, into the air, into his bones. Sometimes, at night, when the candle has burned low and the ink has dried in the well, he speaks the names aloud, softly, one by one, not in prayer, just in acknowledgement, as if calling them back for a moment from the cold place beyond memory. His voice cracks. No one hears. That's fine. The words are not for the living. They are for the parchment, for the air, for the quiet. And in that quiet, he continues, day after day, until the book is full, until the names run out, or until his hand fails. And when that day comes, He hopes someone will write his name too, in the same ink, on the same page, just a name. No need for praise. No need for poetry. Just the truth that he existed, and that in a small stone cell he tried to remember everyone else who did too. Beyond the hedgerows, where the roads dissolve into tangled bramble and wet earth, where the owls do not hoot, and the trees lean as if listening for something dreadful, there lives a woman few will speak of, but all will visit, when desperation becomes stronger than shame. She is the bone picker, the hedge witch, the old midwife turned solitary scavenger, and her job is one that keeps the village running though no one dares admit it aloud. By day, she collects what others avoid, bones left behind by wolves and crows, bits of teeth and knuckle and joint, bird skulls tangled in roots, the bleached femurs of long-dead animals, and sometimes, disturbingly, ones too fresh, too human-shaped. She wears them on cords around her neck, stacks them on shelves in her crooked hut, crushes them into powders, boils them into pastes, sorts them by shape and strength. She knows which bones break easily and which ones sing when scraped against flint. She walks with a slight limp, her back bent from years of crouching in the underbrush, her hands knotted and darkened from earth and blood, and the stains of boiling things best not described. Her hut smells of smoke and rot and something oddly sweet, like dried flowers left in a closed room too long. No one comes to her door for greetings. They come with purpose. A sick child, a barren womb, a curse that won't lift, a sheep that won't eat. And she listens, always without interrupting, her dark eyes fixed on the speaker's mouth, as though words themselves are fragile and must be caught before they vanish. She nods, reaches for a pouch or a jar, whispers instructions. Burn this under the moon. Bury this at the crossroads. Drink this before the cock crows. Most of it works. Some of it doesn't, but they always come back. Because what she does cannot be found in the church or the manor, or the tidy homes with shutters that close tight at dusk. She deals in the pieces of things, the fragments others discard or fear. That is her job, and the bones are central to it. Not just as ingredients, but as records, as warnings. She knows how to read them, knows what a hollow marrow means, what a twisted femur says about the life it carried, what kind of story a cracked tooth can tell. She whispers to them when she thinks no one is listening. Not for comfort, but for guidance. Because bones remember. They do not lie. They are what is left after everything else has rotted away, and she trusts them more than she trusts men. Sometimes she is asked to remove bones, not gather them. A skeleton discovered in the root cellar of an old home. A finger dug up in a garden. She takes them without question, wraps them in linen, adds them to her collection, or returns them to the forest, depending on how they feel in her hands. She speaks to the dead when she buries them. Simple words. You are seen. You are finished. Go softly. She does not fear ghosts, but she does not ignore them either. The children of the village dare each other to run to her window and knock. They scream when the wind rustles her chimes made of bird bones and twisted twine. She say she rides a wolf at night, that she drinks blood, that she can call down storms. She encourages none of this, but she doesn't deny it either. Mystery is its own kind of shield. It keeps her safe in a world that has never been kind to women who live alone, who know too much, who carry knives and speak to bones. She has no apprentice, but sometimes a girl comes to help with the boiling, the scraping, the sorting. She teaches her nothing formally, just lets her watch, lets her listen. The bones will choose who listens well, and she, the old woman, will listen in turn. Her work is slow, dirty, quiet. It is not magic, not really. It is memory, etched into calcium and silence. The bones tell her when the fever is coming, when the earth is restless, when someone will die soon. She never says it aloud, just watches, waits, prepares. When she dies, they may burn her hut. They may scatter her tools, bury the bones, try to forget. But someone, eventually, will return to the forest, will kneel in the dirt, will find the first clean shard poking through the roots, and the work will begin again. Because someone must listen to what the dead have left behind. Someone must walk the wild places and carry the pieces of the forgotten. And someone must know the weight and whisper of bone. At the edge of the battlefield, where the sky was always gray and the ground slick with a mixture of rain and what was no longer just rain, there stood a cart, and beside it a man with no armor and no sword, only a saw, a bucket of water turned pink by use, and a cloth apron so stiff with dried blood it crackled when he moved. He was the field surgeon, the butcher in monk's clothing, the last face many soldiers saw before the blackness took them. His hands were steady, not because he was calm, but because they had no choice. Steady hands were the difference between a man living long enough to scream and a man simply fading away. The tools on his tray were few and brutal. Knives for cutting, clamps for pinching, a mallet, a curved saw, a metal hook, and a spoon-shaped instrument for scraping infection from bone. He kept them sharp with a stone he never let out of sight. Dull blades made the work slower, and slower meant work. His patients were carried to him by their comrades or dragged themselves if they could. He did not ask names. There wasn't time. He saw the wound, judged the blood loss, barked a few words. Hold him, bite this, don't move, and began. There was no anesthesia, no mercy from pain, only a leather strap between the teeth and the hope that shock would come quick. He would cut swiftly, exposing muscle, tendon, bone. The sound of the saw on limb echoed differently than on wood. Wetter, faster. He learned to tune it out. The worst were the ones who looked him in the eye the whole time, not screaming, just watching, as if trying to memorize his face, to take it with them if they didn't make it. He never knew what to say to them, so he said nothing. His hands moved, his eyes did not, and when the limb fell free, he dropped it into a pile behind the cart and moved to the next. That pile grew fast, too fast. At first he tried to bury them, then burn them, then mark them somehow. But eventually there were too many and he stopped trying, just covered them at night and prayed the dogs would stay away. Infection was everywhere, in the wounds, in the air, in the water. He boiled his instruments when he could, but it never seemed to matter. The pus still came. The fever still followed. Some he saved, a few, enough to keep going. enough to convince himself it was worth continuing, but most he did not. He remembered them, not by name, but by how they looked when they stopped breathing, the way the face slackened, the way the hands let go, the silence that came after the screaming. That silence was always worse. The sound of failure. He slept when he could, sitting upright against the wheel of his cart, his hands still stained, his breath sour with fatigue. He dreamed of nothing. When he awoke, there was always someone waiting. Always another body to mend or cut or comfort. Sometimes he had help, an assistant who lasted a day or two before running off or collapsing. But mostly, it was just him, just his hands, just the blood. The officers praised him when he saved someone useful, ignored him the rest of the time. The priests avoided his gaze. The soldiers whispered behind his back, calling him the Hand of Death, the Sawman, the Ghost Butcher. But they still came to him, still begged him to save their brothers, their sons, themselves. He tried. He always tried. But trying didn't mean success, and each failure chipped away a little more. He started counting them, not out loud, just in his head. 100, 200, more, too many. He kept the bones of one man, a soldier who had thanked him while dying, polished the femur and used it to stir his fire. It felt wrong, but nothing felt right anymore. The war never ended. It just shifted, moved, continued, and so did he. Wherever the banners went, the cart followed. Wherever men were torn apart, he waited with his blades and his boiling water, and the voice that no longer shook when he said, "We'll need to take the leg." He no longer asked why, no longer asked if it mattered. He simply did the work. Because it had to be done. Because someone had to hold the saw. Because someone had to cut. And if not him, then who? No one. No one else would. Beneath the ancient wooden beams of a dimly lit hall, where smoke from a central fire pit curls lazily toward a hole in the ceiling, and the walls are lined with heavy tapestries that do little to keep out the cold, there kneels a boy, barefoot, sleepless, silent. He is the gong farmer's apprentice, a child taken not from privilege or choice, but from hunger, now made into one of the most wretched creatures in all the kingdom. The gong farmer is the man who empties latrines, who clears the cesspits, who drags the night soil from beneath castles and taverns and delivers it to the edge of the town where even the flies buzz slower, heavy with the rot in the air. And the boy is his shadow, too small to carry the load, but not too small to fetch the buckets. Hold the lantern and learn the stinking rhythm of this forgotten trade. At night they work, always at night. The stench is unbearable under the sun, but by moonlight, with a cloth soaked in wine vinegar tied over the nose and mouth, it becomes manageable. Barely. They descend into the pits with ropes tied to hooks and a wooden ladder that creaks with every step. The walls are slick. The floor, when there is one, is soft and shifting. Their boots vanish beneath the muck. There are things down there besides waste: rats, bones, old shoes, sometimes the coins of drunk nobles who relieve themselves too hurriedly. The boy learns to reach without fear, to feel through filth, to close his mind against the heat that rises from the pit and coats his skin in a layer that no amount of scrubbing will ever fully remove. His master says little, only gestures when it's time to haul, when the buckets must be heaved up, when the next hole is ready. The gong farmer has long since stopped smelling anything. His beard is matted, his eyes always half-lidded, as if the weight of 1,000 unspoken insults has pushed them low. The townspeople avert their gaze when they pass. Even the drunkards in the alleys move aside, not out of respect, but from reflex. No one wants to be touched by the man who knows the shape and depth of every chamber pot from here to the castle gate. The boy begins to notice the same. That people avoid him now, that no one calls his name anymore, that when he steps into the bakery for scraps, the woman behind the counter flinches before tossing him a crust. They do not see a child. They see a smell, and that smell becomes a second skin. He cannot remember how long he has worked. The nights blend together, broken only by the rhythm of hauling, dumping, dragging, scraping. They carry the waste in thick wooden barrels, strapped to a small cart, its wheels cracked and swollen from the filth that leaks constantly over the sides. They dump it at the waste fields, where a long trench bubbles slowly beneath the stars. Sometimes they burn it. Sometimes it is left to dry. Sometimes, in spring, it is scooped again and sold as fertilizer to farmers who pretend it came from livestock. The boy begins to understand the cycle. Everything rots, everything returns. And someone, always someone, must handle the part that no one else will. He does not speak much anymore. He listens to the creak of rope, the drip of filth, the wheeze of his master's lungs, the soft hiss of waste sliding into the trench. He begins to learn the weight of the work by sound alone. When a bucket is full, when a rope will snap, when a wall is about to give. Once, in a pit behind the butcher's yard, he slipped and went under. Just for a moment. Long enough to know what drowning in darkness feels like. His master pulled him out, said nothing, just handed him a rag and pointed to the next hole. There is no comfort in this work, no reward, only survival, and the knowledge that tomorrow the waste will return and someone will have to carry it away, again and again. The boy sometimes wonders if he will become the gong farmer one day, if he will forget how to speak, if his skin will grow thick enough to keep the stench from sinking deeper, or if one night in some forgotten pit he will slip and not come back. But mostly he just keeps hauling, step by step, bucket by bucket, through the streets that sleep and the shadows that do not, because the city must stay clean, and someone, always someone, must carry the filth. At the cold and ragged edges of the known world, where the sea crashes endlessly against jagged black cliffs and the wind howls like a living thing in mourning, there stands a narrow wooden tower swaying gently with each gust. Inside it, perched in a room no larger than a coffin stood on end, waits a man wrapped in oilskins and isolation. He is the fire watcher, the coast warden, the last line between ships and oblivion. His job is simple on paper, Keep the beacon lit. Tend the fire through the night. Watch the sea. And if the light falters, relight it, no matter the storm, the hour, or the cost. His world is wind and flame and silence. The beacon itself is a bowl of iron mounted high above the sea, filled with a mixture of pitch, oil, and tallow. It burns fast and thick, sending a column of dirty light out over the water like a fragile promise. He must climb to it every few hours, dragging wood and buckets, shielding the flame from rain and mist. With a battered metal shield he holds above his head like a crown of desperation. The climb is steep, the ladder old, the risk constant. One wrong step, one slip on a slick rung, and his body would vanish into the rocks below, torn apart by the sea before morning. But he does it anyway, night after night, because without that light, the ships will not see the coast until it is too late, and then they will break, and then they will die. He has seen it happen, not just once, many times, even with the fire burning, fog that rolls in so thick you could cut it with a knife, ships that veer too close, their sails snapping in panic, hulls grinding against stone. He hears the screams, even from the tower, watches as figures leap into the freezing surf. Sometimes they survive, often they do not. When they do, they come to him, shivering, bleeding, crawling up the rocks like ghosts. He gives them shelter, bread, a blanket. He says little. There is nothing to say. He has no training, no orders beyond the fire. No one checks on him regularly. Supplies come once a month by donkey, dropped at the base of the hill with no greeting. He drags them up himself, sack by sack, breath steaming in the air, back cracking under the weight. He eats dried fish and hard bread, drinks rainwater caught in barrels, sleeps in short bursts, wrapped in wool, his ears always tuned to the sound of the wind. If the fire goes out, he wakes, always. Panic is a teacher. He keeps no clock. The sun and the sea tell him what time it is. The birds, when they come, tell him when to hope. But mostly, he is alone. Days pass without a single ship, sometimes weeks. The sea just rolls and rolls, uncaring, unbroken, dragging storms behind it like shackles. He talks to the fire, calls it names, coaxes it like an animal, curses it when it sputters, praises it when it roars. It is his companion, his burden, his proof that he still exists. His hands are permanently dark with soot. His boots never dry. His beard clumps with salt. No mirror, no vanity, no use. He dreams of being swallowed by the waves, not out of despair, out of inevitability. Because here, on the edge, nothing lasts. The wood of the tower rots, the stones shift, the light dims, and still he watches. He writes nothing down. What would there be to say? The sea was rough, the fire held, the wind screamed. He already knows what each day will be. Still, he climbs. Still he lights, still he watches. Because if he stops, no one else will start. There is no relief, no replacement. Just the next night, the next storm, the next ship depending on the glow of a fire kept alive by a man no one remembers. And someday, when the fire is out and the tower empty, they will ask what happened. They will say, the beacon should have been lit, that someone failed, but no one will remember his name. Only that the light was gone, and the sea, hungry and waiting, took what it was given. In the echoing halls beneath the castle kitchens, down a stone stairway slick with centuries of spilled broth and wine, there crouches a figure shrouded in steam and soot, face smudged with ash, eyes rimmed in red from constant smoke. She is the spit turner, the girl at the fire, the one whose hands blister daily from the endless dance between raw meat and burning coals. Her job is not to cook, not truly. The cook bellows orders from above, from the long table where dozens of birds and haunches and sides of beef are prepared for roasting. But it is her who sits beside the fire for hours, turning the metal spit slowly, methodically, endlessly, so the meat does not burn on one side and rot on the other. She cannot stand up straight anymore. Her back curves forward from the way she hunches on the low stool, always leaning, always reaching. Her arms ache, not from lifting weight, but from holding tension, because to drop the handle, even for a moment, means the food is ruined. And then, in a noble hall, that means punishment. Not for the cook, for her. A slap, a boot, a kick to the ribs while no one is looking. So she keeps turning. Her fingers are wrapped in linen, blackened from grease and flame. Her feet are bare. Shoes melt near the fire. The flagstones beneath her are always warm, always wet with fat that drips and pops and hisses as it hits the coals. She smells of meat and wood smoke and the coppery sting of blood from the joints that haven't been fully cleaned. No one speaks to her unless she's done something wrong. The other servants pass her on the way to and from the pantries, the washing basins, the flower stores. She sees their feet, hears their whispers, catches glimpses of the life above her. Laughter, gossip, moments of stillness. But down by the spit, there is no stillness. Only the motion of turning. Always turning. She was brought here young, too young to remember a time before fire. Her hands were small enough to fit between the iron rods. Her shoulders narrow enough to sit in the gap beneath the hearth. That is why they chose her. She has grown, but the space has not. Now she contorts to fit, knees pressed to ribs, neck tilted just so to keep the smoke from choking her. She coughs anyway, every day. A dry, barking sound that scrapes her throat raw. They tell her to be quiet when she coughs. It frightens the scullery girls. They think it's the sound of death. And maybe it is. She doesn't sleep much. When the fire goes low, the cook blames her. When the meat burns, it is her fault. When the guests complain that the boar is tough, the anger trickles downward until it lands on her shoulders like a blade. But she endures. Because the job, as wretched as it is, means she eats, not from the feast, no, but from the bones picked clean, from the gristle no one wants, from the crusted pans after they've cooled. She eats in secret, in silence, behind the stacks of firewood while the others scrub and shout. And when the bells ring for another banquet, another holy day, another visiting Lord, she returns to the hearth, wipes her hands on her apron, and begins again. She dreams sometimes, not of escape, but of cold, of snow, of water, of air that doesn't shimmer with heat. She doesn't remember what winter feels like, only that once, long ago, she touched a window pane and it was cold enough to hurt. The memory lives in her fingertips. She longs for that pain. Not the searing kind she knows now, but the quiet kind. The kind that means rest. Her arms are strong now, though no one sees it. Her legs cramped, but steady. Her eyes sharp, despite the smoke. She knows by scent when the goose is almost done. She knows the sound of fat when it starts to blister, the color of meat when it's reached the point of no return. She knows more about fire than any knight knows of war. But no one asks her. She is not paid to know, only to turn. And so she does, one rotation at a time, one breath at a time, until the feast ends, until the guests sleep, until the fires die down and she is allowed to crawl from the hearth and lay on the stone floor with her arms curled around herself. And if the morning comes too soon, and it always does, she will rise with the ashes still on her skin, take her place at the spit, and begin again. Because someone must keep the fire. Someone must turn the meat. Someone must suffer, so others may feast. In the dense green thickets beyond the safety of village walls, where brambles claw at the skin and the dampness never dries from your boots, there walks a man whose job it is to find the dead before they rot beyond use. He is the corpse collector, the plague hauler, the man who walks with silence and returns with silence, dragging behind him a wooden cart lined with straw and despair. He wears a hood, not out of modesty or faith, but to keep the stench from choking him entirely. A cloth, soaked in vinegar and tied tightly across his nose and mouth, helps only a little. The air still seeps in, thick and sweet with decay. He does not count the dead. He simply takes them. From huts, from ditches, from beneath trees where no one dared to follow until the flies gave them away. Sometimes they are laid out with coins on their eyes, arms crossed, flowers at their feet. Other times they are curled like children in corners, faces twisted, mouths frozen in cries no one heard. He sees them all, and he touches them all. Gloved? Yes, but still, flesh to flesh. There is no other way to lift them. No other way to do what must be done. The villagers do not thank him. They do not meet his gaze. They leave the bodies by the road or on the edge of town, marked by crude signs or painted rags. They watch from their windows, hands clasped in prayer or trembling in fear, as he hauls the dead away like refuse. He does not speak to them. He has no words left. The plague does not speak either. It takes, and so does he. His cart creaks, with every body added. The straw soaks quickly. He replaces it often. The wheels are stained black, the wood splintered from the weight of days and days of sorrow. He pushes it alone, through mud, through alleys, through fields where the grass no longer grows. In the morning, he empties the cart into the pit, a long trench dug beyond the edge of consecrated ground, because there are too many to bury properly and not enough prayers to go around. He does not dig the pit. That is someone else's job. But he knows it well. He knows its shape, its smell, its slow descent into layers of the unspoken. He tips the bodies in carefully, one by one,